This is Breaking Down Security, and I'm Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian and Mr. Boettcher back in the sideline here for Breaking Down Security.
How's it going?
Yeah. So let me ask you something. Last week with Cheryl Biswas, what did you think about that?
You know what? It's on my phone. It's coming up yeah.
So obviously we're not the first podcast you listen to.
No, I'm actually listening to a book right now. So.
Oh, book! Look at you, fancy.
Yeah.
What book?
Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a great book, actually. Highly recommend it. But anyway, yeah, I started that book before Breaking Down Security came out, and yeah, it's next on my list. So.
Okay.
There you go.
Right on.
There you go. I confess.
Yeah, I actually picked up Gary McGraw's software security, building software in security, or security in software, whatever.
Yeah.
I got the book here. Hold on. It's building security in software security. So yeah, I got his book because the BSIM thing kind of inspired me to want to do that. So I was actually trying to get Gary on to talk about BSIM, but he's not good about answering Twitters, apparently. So I'm going to have to just give him a call one morning and say, hey,
Oh, so you got his number?
I found his number on the website there. So maybe it's him and maybe it's not. I don't know. We'll find out. So
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I liked the discussion we had of Shadow IT with her. I think it was good to do a bit of, definition, to figure out what exactly Shadow IT is. And it's funny that we went over this with Cheryl. The following week, like Monday or Tuesday, I got into a pretty heated discussion with our own devs at the place I work at about mobile devices. Because they were like, oh, yeah, I've got my device and everything, and I run, email on it, and it's all rooted. And I'm like, that's against like company policy, right? And they're like, really? Well, it's my device. I can do whatever I want with it. And I'm like... So, it got into a whole big heated thing. I was like, well, maybe you just don't do things on your personal device. And they're like, well, I just don't have to be available 24/7 for email and phone support. And I'm like, touche. So,
Does the company pay for their phone?
No, the company doesn't pay for their phones.
Well, see, there you go. If the company paid for their phone, then they would have to be available 24/7, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. I actually, like I said in the podcast, I just get around it by using an iPod Touch for email and stuff if I have to be available. Yeah. It's a complicated thing. Yeah, it's like, do I have to pay for a work device and a personal device? Or, I think the big thing is if you want to use a personal device for, email and stuff, that's fine, but you just can't have it rooted. And I think that's going to be the sticking point. It's, you can use your personal device, you just can't have it rooted. And there's technologies out there that are being investigated by us that will detect a rooted device and not allow you to check email or access a VPN. So it's going to be an interesting thing. So...
Yeah, and even if it is not rooted, it doesn't get updated. So I would think a rooted device gets updated more often, or could be updated if you were on top of such things.
Yeah, well, you remember we were in Austin with Charlie Miller. He came in and did a talk with us, and I was like, well, I asked the question to him. I was like, is a rooted device more secure because you can get access to the operating systems earlier? Like right now, I've got Marshmallow on my Nexus 6. That may not necessarily have been the case on the Verizon version that I have.
Right.
And he said, well, to crack the device in the first place, you had to destroy whatever security model was there. And, once you let people in, basically, do they patch the vulnerability that they used to root the box in the first place? And, you don't know if they've put any back doors in or anything like that. And so I was like, yeah, I guess you're right.
Well, that's true. You have to trust whoever wrote the code to actually root your phone in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
right? And you're
Exactly.
running that on your phone when it boots up. So yeah. Um,
All right. Well, that
and
was,
of course that was a couple of years ago, so things may have changed. I don't know.
yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah,
all I know is my Android from Verizon hasn't been updated in like 3 months,
mm,
maybe more.
well, that's planned obsolescence. I mean, that's even worse than a Mac. I mean, a couple of years out of date, and your phone's probably not going to get updates anymore. Which is why I would suggest getting the Nexus phones because I think they're still getting updates, and they're made directly from Google, and there's no bloatware on them. So that's one reason I got it because there's no farewell Barbie golf or something on there to try as an app or something, which weirded me out. So yeah, I mean that's it's always an option. You can get a Nexus phone or you can get an iPhone. iPhones don't have a lot. I don't know if iPhones have bloatware on them. I'd have to ask somebody, but I'm pretty sure they don't. Um, so yeah,
It
so
depends on your definition, I guess.
yeah, and you can always. Cheryl had a good time with just me here. I wanted to have you on, but it was during the workday, and you probably wouldn't have been able to get on. So. Yeah, so if you want to listen to that interview I did with Cheryl, you can always go and download that on the RSS feed. So this week, we are talking about security by obscurity, which,
Okay. Yeah. Security through obscurity. You've heard the term before, so and maybe you have your own definition of it, I guess. I know I have mine, but what is there an official definition?
well, the idea of security by obscurity. Let me see. I actually looked it up on Wikipedia because surprisingly enough, Wikipedia has a page for it. So the idea is the use of secrecy of the design or implementation to provide security. A system relying on security through obscurity may have theoretical or actual security vulnerabilities, but its owners or designers believe that if the flaws are not known, then the attackers will be unlikely to find them. So that tells me that it sounds like you're I don't know, overlooking things, or you're trying to sweep things under the rug with the idea that the attackers will never find them.
Uh-huh. So what does that apply to? Does it apply to a security program, a network, an application? I mean, what is it? What's the scope here?
Well, I think it could be software, it could be hardware, it could be a network. I mean, you could have a host hiding on the network, not know, and people not know what it is in the hopes that you can use it as I don't know, private file dump, or, it could, maybe you put the device on the network to monitor network traffic and you want it to be a hole. So maybe you make it so that it can't be found by ping or by, maybe it's that proverbial Windows box that's sitting inside the dry-walled up room that you didn't even know existed. That kind of thing.
So the first thing that comes to my mind is a piece of software. So if you never open source it, never let anyone look at the code, then it's kind of security through obscurity. You don't really want to test it. You're hoping that nobody finds anything, and they're less likely to if you don't give them the code to analyze, right?
Yeah, and that could be the same argument for any closed source software. I mean, look at a fairly,
Windows?
I was going to say a fairly well known operating system, but yeah, okay, we'll just call them out. Windows is not necessarily an open source software, so it's only available to people inside the company, whereas you want to believe that things like Linux or OpenSSL or things are more secure because the code is open and people can look at it. But it's been, as we've seen in the past couple of years, where OpenSSL didn't get a lot of eyeballs, and then you get things like Heartbleed. So people are obviously not looking at the code, or they're looking at the code and not understanding or grokking what is there in front of them.
Or the people that are looking at the code really hard are the ones that are going to exploit it or want to, right? They're looking for those flaws in open source software, whereas, most people take it for granted that other people are looking at it for good reasons.
Yeah. Or you're the dev and you've looked at the code so often that it just starts running together. I mean, it's like writing a paper. You got to have somebody else look at it to see, make the corrections or do the proofing on it because, everything looks fine to you and because you're used to looking at the same, words on paper. I think security by obscurity really came about from the encryption area of the
Oh,
world.
yeah?
Yeah. You've got so many ciphers out there, or, somebody's got this brand new encryption algorithm, ROT14 in this case, where, oh, it's so awesome. Nobody will be able to figure it out. Well, ROT14 is just 13 plus one, and then for those of you who don't know what ROT13 is, it's you take the A to Z English alphabet, and then
you shift it.
You shift it 13 places, and you just make your coded information or your codes from that. Well, using ROT14, you're just shifting it 14 places instead of 13, and so instead of A being N, it's A being O, or in this case,
Right. It's akin to, okay, I'm gonna take, all of our data and I'm gonna bit shift it 3 over, and then I'm gonna, add 1 to each bit or whatever you're doing, and nobody will ever figure that out because it's so random.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The DVD code that or the Blu-ray code that they used for a long time to encrypt Blu-ray device or Blu-ray discs, which was finally busted a couple of years ago, is one example of security by obscurity. It was it took a long time. I'd say probably good 5 or 6 years, but it was finally derived and guessed. The master key was finally done. And by doing so, people were able to make archival copies of Blu-ray discs on their own.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of also Kevin Johnson told the story where he was testing a database, and he kept getting Oracle errors, and it didn't make any sense to him. And it turns out that it was a different database, and he found out later that the admin took all the errors and changed them to Oracle errors, to try and fool whoever was there to thinking it was Oracle when it really wasn't.
Okay, now that's a different kind of security by obscurity, though. That would be what I would consider a good type of security, because we talk about active defense with Ben Donnelly, and that is a way to obscure a device or platform. You can make if you recompile your Apache code, you can make the server string look like Nginx, or there are ways of obfuscating your web application code in JavaScript or Python to make it so that it's not easy for reverse engineering of that application. I mean, you can have the code out there, but to the layman or to the guy who's not really into reverse engineering, it looks like gibberish.
Well, in that example as well, he was pretty much going to figure it out what the guy was doing.
Okay.
Because someone of that caliber eventually will get to the right answer, and it wouldn't have taken very long, right? So, the guy just wasted time, basically. Yeah, it was a roadblock or a speed bump, if you will, for a skilled pen tester. But why do that? Why go to all that trouble when you could be hardening your defenses in a meaningful way, right?
Okay, now I argue to the positive on that. I think, yes, you had Kevin Johnson looking at a database. Now, if it was me looking at that database, I'd be like, oh crap, I can't do anything. I'm going to go on. You're getting you mentioned the 80-20 rule. 80% of people who probably were pen testing that weren't using, that didn't know what they were doing. Yeah, right. They're gonna move on after 2 hours. They're like, God, I can't get into this. I'm gonna move on to something else. So what that DBA did was add a level of security. Now, if that was the only security he had, then that's not necessarily good security. But he added a layer of security to that by obscuring what was there. Am I wrong in that assessment?
No, he did add, a speed bump, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like IPS, right?
Yeah.
A WAF.
Yeah.
It is a speed bump.
Sure. Yeah, and hopefully by somebody poking around in your innards doing that, you might have additional triggers that go, oh, yeah, I got somebody trying to do this. I know that they shouldn't be doing that. So obviously something bad is going on with my network.
Well, you could say that for a regular database error, right? So I think we've said before on the cast, if you start getting database errors like your query, what's the error? It's malformed SQL.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen in your production environment because obviously your application was QA'd not to have those errors all the time, right?
You're sweet.
You shouldn't get any database errors when your application is actually functioning.
Yeah, or if you're using prepared statements or queries that are preformed, what normal is supposed to be. So yeah, if you're getting errors of that nature from a specific location, then yeah, you know that you're not that something out of the ordinary is going on. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, when we talked to Ben Donnelly about obscuring things, one of the things that I did from when I was first getting into information security, I thought was so clever was like running my SSH server on a non-standard port. I put it on like 20,022 or something, and I was like, "Oh, I'm so lead or whatever." Didn't last much longer than that. It only lasted a little bit longer than when it was on port 22. It just got rid of all the log file entries where people were trying to get in with dictionary attacks or whatever.
You kind of take care of the skitties at that point, right?
Yeah. I mean, if somebody's doing a dedicated scan of your network, they're going to find something running on port 2022 or 20,022 that is out of the ordinary. But yeah, you've gotten rid of the 80-20 rule, which is always good.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say it's better than nothing, right? But once it gets figured out, it's kind of like you have nothing at that point, or that ends up being, a wash.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the only layer of security that you have. It should be a layer of security if you use the defense in depth idea. Yeah.
So let's go into you got reasons for obscuring, okay?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, one of the ideas I came up with when I was doing the show notes was a poor man's active defense. Whether a place I used to work ran Tomcat, for instance, and they changed the configuration on the system so that it didn't run from a certain location. And we had a pen tester, I remember, come in, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I found your directory of where your war files are in Tomcat and tried to put a war file in there, but it wouldn't read the war file." And that was like, "Oh yeah, because we have this configuration." And he was like, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, that would have been great to know." And I was like, "Well, maybe we didn't want you to know that or something, So yeah, I mean, you can set your applications to, not run from their localities. You can also put, Ben has a Honey application in ADHD that he helps maintain that will set up fake ports that run SSH servers, for instance, or, obscuring can be a poor man's active defense.
Okay. And also I've seen certain defenders take, the Apache, I guess the header, and just get rid of it. So if you scan it with a vulnerability scanner, it's like, I don't know what version this is. Yep. And so all of your vulnerabilities, your signatures that rely on that tag go away. So you don't get any false positives, and you don't get any vulnerabilities that rely on that tag, right? So you don't know. Well, the downside of that is when you're scanning that system with a scanner, you you don't get the data that you need to really assess where you are. Does it need to be patched? Well, you don't really know.
Yeah, you'll get a lot of false positives. I know that Apache in the con file will allow you to get rid of the version string. I mean, it'll tell you server name or server type Apache, but it won't tell you you're running 1.4.24 or something like that. It'll just say Apache. And you can actually go in, if you compile Apache from source, like I said, and you can actually make it call server type, Joe Bob's web server or whatever. And that'll just throw the scanners for a loop too, because they won't even know what that is.
But there are pen testing tools, red team tools that will actually look for ways that the different versions of Apache respond to certain requests, and it'll guess as to what version you have. And typically it's been pretty good in the past.
Yeah, you can fingerprint web servers, you can fingerprint OSs, you can fingerprint your CMS if you're running WordPress and you've got obfuscation in there that hides it or makes it like a Drupal. They'll be like, oh yeah, obviously this is not a Drupal installation. This is a WordPress or something like that. It's not 100%. It's not foolproof, but it's just another layer of obscurity. One of the ones that I thought of additionally is maybe using an OS that people don't normally use. So you go to a site or you go to like a small business or something, and you've got they have this IT guy they've contracted, and he uses FreeBSD for a firewall, or OpenBSD for a firewall, using PF instead of IP tables, or because they can't afford the more enterprise level stuff. So you come in and you're in an unfamiliar environment already, because not everything in BSD is the same as in Linux, and maybe you've never seen PF before, or maybe it works differently. So a lot of times you'll go into a government installation and they're still using, Windows NT on something, God forbid. They may have it super hardened. They may have it in an isolated network. It may not have any connection to the rest of the network. You may not have any way of accessing anything on there, or they may use OS2 or something weird like that. Or they may have a mainframe, using obscure operating systems, or obscure applications. Maybe something built inside in-house is a method of obscuring, making it harder for a pen tester or an attacker to get in.
Yeah, we meant to put that mainframe there. Yeah.
That's our AS400. How many pen testers are going to know how to pen test an AS400, for instance?
A small percentage.
Very small percentage. Yeah. I wanted to get Big Indian Smalls on to talk about that. So maybe that's something we can talk about with him. So yeah, I mean, the other thing is, hiding processes or code. I mean, you can, the DVD copy protection used to be a thing, and then they broke that. So, I mean, those are things, you should not be realistic about the obscurity that you're putting in, and know that it's not foolproof. It will be broken. It will be circumvented in many cases. And it shouldn't be the only layer that, you should have additional securities in place. But things like DRM is, that's always going to be circumvented eventually.
What's DRM? I got a blank.
Digital rights management.
Oh, okay.
Basically you've been given the key, and all the content is in a cage. And so at some point you're going to be able to derive the key that you're going to use to unlock the code. I mean, I buy Amazon books, and the AZW DRM on there's, you download Calibre and you can strip the DRM out of them. I don't recommend anybody doing that, because that's not what you're supposed to do. But I like to make PDFs of the things that I make and annotate them and stuff. So I just don't share the books. So yeah. So, I mean, you shouldn't make obfuscation the only layer. You can obfuscate your code. I know that if I've been on certain websites where the JavaScript was just a wall of text. And there's actually plugins in Firefox and stuff where you can beautify the JavaScript. and all they've done is add like a bunch of extra like variables and methods and strings and useless crap in there that doesn't do anything to make it harder for you to analyze the code.
I saw some VB script today. It was a piece of malware.
Oh yeah?
And it was it was all gibberish except for the math. It was like 1 + 5 + 1 + 5 - 1. It was beautiful, actually. Just a page of just gibberish, right? It had all the the parentheses in the right places and things,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, they tried to obfuscate it by I don't know whether it was encrypted or encoded, whatever, but yeah. So they try to hide what they're doing, but of course that didn't work. I mean, because I actually found out what they were doing, and what they were doing wasn't working anyway. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Well,
But,
I guess
yeah, you see it in malware all the time, where they encode or even encrypt some of the strings that show up either inside the executable or in their VB scripts or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point where the bad guys are obfuscating things too. They use various payloads when they're setting up their interpreter scripts or whatever. You can use encoding for that, or if you're trying to get around a WAF, for instance, you may put an image in base 64 encoding. Or a link in a base 64 encoded a link, which, WAFs are trained to look for specific things, and a base 64 encoded link is not something they're supposed to be looking for. So they'll let that through. Understanding obscurity is, can help you know when something bad is going on. So if you notice obscurity, you can protect against it.
Yeah, and I've seen, or I've heard of, I don't do malware analysis to that deep of a level, but if you're trying to, decompose malware to find out exactly the inner workings, and I've heard that some of the malwarians will go and they'll put in these, jump statements all over the place. So it takes hours and hours and hours and hours just to find out what one piece of it does, just because they've made all these, obscure things go on inside that do actually nothing.
Yeah.
It's like you're driving in circles for, 3 hours, and then finally they go right on track where they're supposed to. That kind of thing.
And that's the idea. They want you to not be able to.
They want you to give up.
Yeah, they want you to give up. They spend all this time making this, and they want it to be able to own a couple of 100,000 machines. And the last thing they want is somebody to understand the inner workings, so they can shut down the botnet, that kind of thing. So they obscure it as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So is good obscurity good? What is good obscurity? I know we talked about that a little bit.
Well, the good obscurity is, like I said, to make sure that you can, running thing. If you've got access, if you've got SSH running on port 22, if it's exposed to the outside world, you're going to have people banging on it night and day. So you might create port address translation in your switch that allows you to connect on port 8122. Or you might use something like port knocking, which is another active defense measure, where you connect to 3 different ports before port 22 opens. That's a method of obscuring. I mean, you can still see it
almost
going
like a
on.
password or a code.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's pretty cool. That brings to mind when I was at another organization, we were doing like billions of dollars in money transfers, right? And we were a big target.
Sure.
Huge target because of all the money that was going through our systems. However, nobody knew we were doing it. Nobody had heard of this company. I had never heard of this company. Right. So if the attackers don't know that, this company is doing this sort of thing, they don't know to go attack it. So you keep a low profile, right? You don't go and announce, hey, we're the best ever,
Yeah, that's true.
AKA come hack me.
Yeah, yeah. Another form of obscurity for physical security or for operational security is, not advertising who you work for. And that cuts down on other things like phishing. Bob was telling me the other day that he's had a massive phishing attempt at his office, and several people have been hit by phishing emails. And I was like, oh, I haven't gotten any.
What do these people have in common, huh?
What do these people have in common? They're probably broadcasting who they work for and what company they work for. Yeah. So, of course, if somebody's going to target that company, they're going to find people who work for that company through means that are available, social media, for instance. So if you don't advertise you work for that company on social media, are you going to get as many phishes as somebody who doesn't, or who does advertise themselves? I so far have not been phished at my company. I'm probably one of the few people who have not. Is it because I'm a security person? Maybe, but it's there's tons of ways of obscuring who you work for. You just don't tell people, that kind of thing, or you only share out to certain people. So, of course, good obscurity is good, and bad obscurity is complete ownage. So, like bad encryption methods, like elliptic curve. What is that one? The DRBG dual something. Well, it was the one that RSA create or ECDRBG. It was the great. I can't spell ECDRBG. Yeah. Dual elliptic curve deterministic random bit generator. It was the one that was supposedly out, and the NSA was like, oh yeah, you guys should use that. And it was inherently weak because it was made that way. Because there was some obscure junk going on inside of it that some people knew about, but others didn't, and they wanted them to use it because they knew it was inherently weak. Mm-hmm. So once somebody blew the lid on that and found out that it was in fact weak, everybody is saying, oh, don't use it. That's a method of bad obscurity. Well, it depends on who you're talking to. If it was the people who created it, that would have been good obscurity up until a certain point. But for people who wanted to use it, who wanted to be secure and safe, that's bad obscurity. So, so takeaways for me, I've always been a fan of security through obscurity. I think there's a place for it, but I think it will come at a price if you only make it your only layer of security. Yeah,
you got to put it in context, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Build the onion, right?
Yeah, it's a control that can be used responsibly. Just don't use it. Don't rely on it too heavily, and always expect it to be owned at any time. But it can be used as a time waster for attackers. It can be used to make sure that your software cannot be easily re-engineered. Again, it's the 80-20 rule. The vast majority of people, the really determined attacker is going to get through your obscurity, like you mentioned with Mr. Johnson. So,
yeah. Well, that was my takeaway. It won't do much for a skilled attacker.
Right on.
Right there, someone who's skilled will find ways around. When I did an interview with Marcus, he said, why are we trying to defend our networks against white hats? That's crazy. Mm-hmm. Right. And I knew what he was saying, but it really didn't sink in until I realized what, it was something Michael Goff told me when they were setting up honeypots to try and catch these guys. They would set up a honeypot and the bad guys never touched it. Never touched them at all.
Yeah.
And so he found out that what they were doing was they were listening and waiting, and they were seeing what the people in the organization did, and then they would do that. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you never touched a honeypot, then they weren't going to touch a honeypot. Right? They were going to go after the things and keep a low profile, be quiet about it, and only do things that they know would work. It wouldn't go banging on a system for, trying to brute force passwords. They weren't scanning the network or anything. They were just there. They would compromise a box and they'd listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's pretty much what he meant.
Yeah.
Why are we trying to defend against network scans? The black hats don't scan networks like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't just add obscurity without, you have to add it artfully. You can't just go, oh, I want to, go ahead and make it, like you were saying, just adding honeypots to the network. The bad guys knew you were trying to add that level of obscurity. It's like you have to make the bait worth it. It has to be tasty.
Yeah.
It has to be something they want. So you can't just all of a sudden, drop a bunch of documents that look, incriminating in some place if they've already gotten access to your network. It has to be smart. It has to be done properly. So obscurity done well is good, but obscurity done poorly is worse than securing your network properly. So, all right. Well, that was awesome. Have there been any? I wanted to change gears a little bit here. I'm going to throw you a curve. Has there been any new releases to LogMD?
No public releases, but yeah, we've added some features to it that'll be pretty sweet.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, that's very awesome. Have you thought about submitting any papers or doing any talks yourself on the development of that?
On the development of LogMD, no. Right now, I'm just learning as much as I can about detection, incident response, logging, things like that. I leave that to the expert, right?
Your marketing department?
Yeah, my marketing department. I do have an idea for a talk, but that's probably a couple years away. It's probably when we implement some more advanced features into it. But right now, It's one thing at a time, right?
Yeah. You're probably learning a lot of PowerShell because that got real sexy real quick, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, learning some PowerShell, and other tools as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm actually going to do a talk in a couple of weeks. I've been invited to an ISSA group in Tacoma, Washington here, the Rainier ISSA group. They want me to come and talk. And I'm taking the page from, talk about what you know. So I'm going to be doing something on vulnerability management, at least my experiences with it in the past 15 years for some folks. I don't know if it'll actually turn into doing something more, maybe where I submit the paper elsewhere, but I will be making an appearance at Rainier ISSA in January. I'm talking to my mentee. His name is Podfish. You can follow him on Twitter. He's a member of the Rainier ISSA group over there, and he said, "Yeah, come on by." So I'm going to be doing that. I think the first week in January. So I'm excited, and I'm sweating in odd places. So it's obviously something that I need to do. So
yeah, congratulations, man.
Yeah,
it's a big step. Public speaking.
Oh, I don't have a problem with the public speaking. It's just they don't. I'm just a guy that does things. I'm not. I guess information sharing is good in whatever realm, but I do the podcast on a weekly basis. It's going to be an entirely different dynamic. There's only about 12 to 15 people, so hopefully they won't judge me too harshly. So,
well, if you've been doing it for that long, I'm sure there's something everybody can learn.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. Yeah, and I've definitely learned stuff myself in the past year and a half working at my current job. It's been a dynamic change in how I do vulnerability management. It used to be see the vuln, kill the vuln, because of compliance, but now it's not like that anymore because I've got people who actually push back and go, yeah, we're not going to patch that because we have controls in place for that. And, also, that's not something we use on a regular basis, so we're not going to go ahead and patch that. So the interaction with people has been a lot different. And, I'll definitely post the video if I take video of it to our YouTube channel so people can look at it.
Sweet.
All right. So, Mr. Boettcher, how do people get a hold of you on the Twitters and on the social medias?
Yeah, just Twitter. Well, LinkedIn too, if you want to link in with me. And on Twitter, I'm at Boettcherpwned, BOETTCHERPWNED.
Very nice. You can find me at Brian Brake, BRYAN BRAKE. The official BreakSec podcast Twitter is @BreakSec. I'm pretty much the one who just checks that. Mr. Boettcher, I think, has a password, but I'm the only one who actually retweets and does anything on there. But you can still come by. We post the podcast and things on there, things of interest. We have a Facebook page, facebook.com/breakingdownsec. We have a Tumblr. We have a Google blog that basically is just a rehash of the website show notes and everything.
And if you have questions, hit us up, man. We love the conversations.
Oh yeah, and we're on iTunes. We're on the TuneIn app. If you have TuneIn Radio app, you can listen to every one of our episodes on there. If you're on iTunes and you do download with iTunes, please feel free to leave us some feedback. We don't, I read them, so we've got some new feedback on there. It's much appreciated. We have a Patreon, so if you find value in this, you can give us some money. I do know that by the end of the year, we probably will have about $150 in there that we'll just go ahead and donate to Hackers for Charity, because I didn't really expect to do anything with the money in the first place. So all that will go to Hackers for Charity or something like that. I'll probably match it and drop in another 100 or so just to, make it worth something. So, so if you find value in the podcast, please, drop us a couple of bucks or something, And that was it for this week. We're getting short on the year. We're gonna not take a break like most podcasts, so we're gonna have content all the way up until the first of the year. So, don't think we're going on vacation. We'll always be here. So, Mr. Boettcher, you have a great week, sir, and I will. I'll talk to you again next week.
All right, you too.
All right, everyone, have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.